in the recent past, there was a lot of companies within the entertainment sphere that were failing because they were pushing DEI initiatives that audiences didn't want. They just wanted good content and they weren't getting that. So it's kind of gotten some companies to turn their back on these sort of initiatives. Some companies within the gaming industry have even gone so far as to advertise their products as being free of DEI and other things like that. Now, there's been companies that have been doing this, but they've also been lying about it because they understand on the one hand that it's bad for business whenever they're pushing DEI, and they understand that it's toxic to their product. But at the same time, the higher ups at the company are true believers in these causes. So they're going to continue to push it, even if they're not going to be as overt about it as they have been in the past. They're going to try to hopefully slip it underneath the radar. However, there are other companies within the gaming industry that frankly never cared about this sort of thing. They just saw it as a new trend that they needed to jump on board with because it was going to be profitable for them. And now that they see that it isn't profitable, they're willing to cut it out like a cancerous tumor. However, with some of these companies that have kind of embraced this in the past, even if they didn't really necessarily care about it themselves, they were still hiring people who actually did care about this. And now that they're trying to kind of turn over a new leaf, so to speak, a lot of these true believers that they've hired at these companies are not happy with the results. Storylines have been cut. Baldur's Gate 3 actor warns that diversity is being removed from some games. This is coming from The Gamer. Ever since Donald Trump's win in the 2024 U.S. presidential election, companies and their executives were quick to try and curry favor with the president. This includes ditching DEI initiatives and policies, which even more companies later joined them on following an anti-DEI executive order from Trump. While many of these initiatives were strictly about hiring practices, the sentiment behind the shift in policy was felt everywhere, with the rise in racist, transphobic, and other bigoted laws and attitudes across the United States and beyond. The funny thing is, or at least the irony in all of this, is a lot of these DEI initiatives were the sexist and racist policies because they were discriminating against people based off of those characteristics. And then they would try to argue that that's not what's going on. They're just trying to create a space for more marginalized voices or more representation and other things like that. But if you have two people that are going for a job, you have a white person and another person who's a part of one of these oppressed classes or whatever, and you choose to hire them based off of those characteristics, well, then you're discriminating against the white person as a result of this. This is something that the Trump administration is saying, like, no, you can't do this sort of thing because, well, it's actually illegal to hire people like that. And a lot of these companies have started to face lawsuits, and they're trying to make it seem as if like this is strictly just the result of Donald Trump's executive orders. But if you actually look back, a lot of these companies were starting to also shy away from these sort of things in the past because, like I said at the start of the video, they understood that it wasn't good for their bottom line. It's just now they have more of an excuse because they can be like, whoa, I didn't want to do this. I'm just forced to do this. This is bad Trump's fault for the reason why I have to get rid of these DEI initiatives. But rest assured, when he leaves office in a couple of years, because he's going to leave office, and these executive orders will probably go away at some point, these companies aren't just going to go back to like, well, now we didn't need to hire a bunch of DEI people or anything like, no, that's not going to happen. They were just looking for an excuse to get rid of them, and now they have one. Now it seems that the gaming industry is not immune to this either. Speaking with me in an interview that will be published tomorrow, actor Samantha Barrett, who played Kalash in Baldur's Gate 3, tells me that they are already aware of game devs who have had their work censored, as the industry appears to be bowing down to the regressive politics of Trump's second term. I would actually say it's more progressive to not be discriminating against certain people, but I don't know. I guess they would disagree with me on that one. This came up in my chat with Barrett when I asked if in our current climate, they feared that a game as diverse as Baldur's Gate 3 would struggle to get greenlit now. Without exposing devs, I know that's happening. Their storylines have been cut. They tell me historically appeasement is a really bad thing. Despite this, they are optimistic that this won't last forever. Indies exist and people can write and communicate with communities will get together, and we will absolutely get through this together. Yes, there are indie developers out there and they can produce whatever they want, but we've seen also in the past, like I said at the start of the video, a lot of these major companies have been trying to push DEI, or when they're pushing DEI, it really hasn't been good for their bottom line. And a lot of the games, even from long-standing franchises, have failed, and it's even worse for indie devs. Concord, that was kind of picked up by Sony, but that was also started off as an indie game. Dustborn, that was also an indie game. Both those games were colossal failures, and they're pretty much just the poster child of a lot of these DEI initiatives within video games. And I think a lot of people saw those failures as pretty much irrefutable proof that people are just tired of this stuff right now, and they don't want these type of things in their video games. And a lot of companies, when they see this happening, they're like, well, why did these particular games fail? And when they look at online, the discourse surrounding it, even from the people who are supporting these sort of games, only thing they're ever talking about why they're supporting these games and all the good stuff about the game is just the representation and other things like that. And a lot of these developers are looking at that and feeling like, well, there's obviously some people who want this DEI stuff within video games, but clearly they're not a big enough market for us to try to cater to. So maybe these people who are saying that they don't want this sort of thing in games, maybe we should listen to them, because apparently when video games aren't having that stuff in them, or when it's obvious that that stuff isn't in certain video games, those are the ones that ultimately sell really well. This also comes amid the revival of the Gamergate movement, which is seeing developers, journalists, and many others in the gaming industry harassed online. The Gamergate movement is basically just people calling out journalists for their crap. There has been an incestuous nature between games journalists and developers in the industry for quite some time right now. And a lot of people have been calling that out. Obviously, games journalists don't like that, so they're going to try to paint it as some label. But this whole thing going on right now, there's really no collective movement or anything else to that matter. It's literally just people online calling out what they see right now, and it just so happens that a lot of people see what's going on within the industry and they're just saying so. It also means we often see the argument that games with characters that are non-white and or queer will sell poorly. Baldur's Gate 3 quite obviously disproved that. Yeah, so they're just kind of disproving their whole argument. A lot of people enjoyed Baldur's Gate 3 because even though there was those other things in it that they try to say is just representation, overall the game was good. And this kind of gets to my point whenever I say DEI in games, or what I mean when I say DEI in games and why that's actually bad for the gaming industry, is I usually mean it to refer to as like not necessarily having like non-white characters in it or non-straight characters or other things like that within video games. Whenever I say DEI is bad for games, what I mean is the people at the company aren't necessarily doing something that's for the betterment of the game itself or for the betterment of the final product. They're doing something because they want to check the right boxes, whether that's having certain characters behave a certain way because it's checking the right boxes, having certain dialogue options that don't feel like it's organic to the game itself or to the world, but it feels more like the writer just taking some time to lecture the audience on whatever they personally believe. And even if it's not necessarily overtly within the game itself, if you have a company that's prevalent within the company culture where they push DEI, then that means the people working on the game aren't necessarily the best people for the job. They're just the best people for the job who happen to check the right boxes. And whenever there's a game that pushes DEI that has a lot of other issues, Dragon Age the Veilguard is a big example of that. Some people try to defend it by saying like DEI wasn't the reason, or having non-binary characters and other things like that wasn't the reason why the game failed. It failed because there was bad writing, bad design for the missions and other things like a lot of other technical aspects of it. And I'm saying, yeah, that stuff is bad too. But the reason why that stuff is bad is because at the studio, they didn't hire the best people for the job. They hired the best people who checked the right boxes. And when you see a lot of that stuff within the game itself, it's just a pretty big red flag that that's also what's going on behind the scenes at the company. And it's a pretty big indicator that the company itself is probably not going to be the best ones to produce that type of game. As Barrett alludes to, not everyone in the industry is going backwards. Yeah, some people are continuing to push DEI, I guess. The indie scene can allow for more creative freedom as there's no publisher to appease. It's worth noting that Baldur's Gate 3 was self-published too. This also isn't anything we haven't come back from before, as back in the 2000s, we saw Mass Effect 2 devs forced to write out a queer romance for the companion Jack. In response to negative attention from Fox News, we've certainly come a long way since then, with plenty of games allowing for queer romances. And you know what? I don't have a problem with indie devs doing whatever they want, or if you want to have a game like that, by all means, make your Dustborns and other things like that. Have at it. Just don't try to hijack any legacy games or any long-standing franchises in order to try to push your message. And if you make your indie game and it sells good amongst your target audience, then fine, more power to you. But if it doesn't sell, I mean, that's just because that's what people are not interested in. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.